first duty of a democratic government to make sure a credible fourth estate exists. Otherwise, the entire governance of the country will collapse. You cannot have a democracy and self-government and the rule of law. And when I read those words initially in graduate school 30 years ago, I didn't pay any attention to them because we had a press system. For better or for worse, it existed. You know, you might dispute the quality of it, but it certainly existed in sufficient quantity. And now, though, when you read those words, they jump off the page at you because you were seeing a disintegration. It really says that if we understand the First Amendment properly, it's not that it condones our creating new media, it demands it.
But in terms of some of the proposals that you have in the book, you have one, for instance, about a federal tax credit that would help support media. Could you talk about that, but also in the context of the fact that I wouldn't say now that journalists have a high rating among the American public, that generally speaking, there is a sense in great portions of the American population that the media are part of the problem. Now, admittedly, much of that is directed at the commercial media, but even the fact that the nonprofit media doesn't even register that much in terms of the public's concern, the issue then becomes how do you get the public to marshal behind government support of the media when there's such a public discontent with the media?
Look, the first thing you say is, we're not here to save the media that gave you George Bush in a stolen election of 2000 or gave you the war in Iraq. I mean, that was a lousy media system, and if that system's going down, let's not send the Coast Guard out. But if we're going to send the Coast Guard out to save anything, let's save some journalists. Let's save the concept of gathering information and speaking truth to power. And this, you know, you're right. The surveys will show, do you like mainstream media? No, they don't. But if you ask people, do you want information? And do you want it in an easily accessible way where I can get it when I need it and not have to spend 6 or 7 hours trolling the internet trying to find the truth? Yeah, they say yes. You know, we frame our entire dialogue and our entire message here not for you know, somebody who's working in journalism, not for somebody who's got an immense amount of time to consume journalism. We say this is not a dialogue about journalism, newspapers, or media. This is a dialogue about democracy. And James Madison, for all of his failings, again, part of this hidden history, James Madison said that a supposedly democratic system without freedom of the press and access to the information that it provides is a prologue to a tragedy or a farce or both. What we're suggesting is this old media system, for however we refer to it, produced tragedy and farce, a war, an unelected president. What we want to talk about now is how we create a new media system that works and sustains democracy. And you know what? At every event we've done across the country and in dialogues all over, and I think the truth is you two know this, you start talking about it in that way and you start saying, these are public policy choices that citizens can be involved in, people get very engaged and they come up with better ideas than Bob and I have written about already. And that's where we want this discourse to go. We don't want to end it. We want to start it. It's going to take a long time. But if we don't have this discourse, I can guarantee you, in the next 10 years, we will move to a state where we will look back longingly to the days of the great media of the late 1990s, early 2000s. That's how dangerous the future looks.
What are the latest issues that the free press has taken on? For example, the issue of net neutrality. Yeah. Where is it now? Are the corporations, the cable companies, the telecoms writing the legislation that would privatize the Internet?
They are. Right now, the phone and cable companies are putting a full-court press on in Washington to try to get net neutrality eliminated as a policy, meaning that they would be able to privatize the Internet, in effect, and determine which websites, which services come through and which don't, and they would be like the cable companies. You'd have to pay them off to get through, and they could even prohibit you from going through if they wanted to. And it is a central fight right now. The future of the Internet hangs in the balance, and free press is leading the fight. They're fighting at the FCC. They're fighting in the court system. They're basically fighting behind closed doors. They're not doing it at Congress yet, but we have to be authority. And again, in this struggle compared to journalism, with what free press is doing, we're fighting the biggest lobbies in Washington just about. And these are companies, AT&T and Comcast are not free market companies. They were created by government monopoly licenses. They're not very good at what they do. Consumers hate them, but what they're great at doing is buying off politicians. That's their specialty. That's their added advantage over everyone else. The journalism fight's a little different, though, that free press is engaged in, because there the corporations are heading out the door. They're saying, see you later. We had a nice run for 100 years. We cashed in our chips. Now we're moving on to something else. Here there's this massive void we're trying to fill, and I think it's a different political fight for that reason, and it gives us hope that we can have more success. Because the sort of stuff we're talking about will increase journalism. And actually, if you look at European countries, those countries that have instituted the most journalism subsidies for independent community and public media, for alternative newspapers, the private media prosper too, the private journalism, because there's a real community of journalism, and sort of the tide raises all the boats. So there, I think the political fight is, we're farther away from people envisioning that we have the power in us to change it, but we don't have the same direct corporate opposition that we face in net neutrality, where truly we're fighting giants. They're determined to destroy us.
Well, one of the interesting things, though, about this net neutrality fight, what's different is that they've not only, these telecoms and have not only bought off the politicians, they are increasingly neutralizing and winning over major civil rights organizations. So that in the past, where civil rights movement was part of the movement to democratize the media, what's happening now, unfortunately, is whether it's the National Council of La Raza or several of these other civil rights groups, they're lining up now with the telecoms on this issue and making it a lot more difficult to build a more solid mass movement around it.
Well, Juan, these are the struggles we always have. And again, these are, Joel Rogers has this phrase, an offhand phrase, but one that describes it, hungry people fighting over food don't demand what they need, right? And so we have many groups that have limited resources, especially in this bad economic time. And so the telecoms and others are looking around for anybody that they can influence. But I want to defend a lot of folks in the civil rights community. Congresswoman Donna Edwards, a person who comes from civil rights and activism, has been just incredibly outspoken on these issues and has fought hard. Members of the Congressional Latino Caucus, or Hispanic Caucus, and Black Caucus, we have many allies. Not as many as we want. We're fighting, but I honestly believe that's not the core challenge. It's a part of it. It's one we have to be concerned about. We've got to do a lot of movement building. But the core challenge is when policy is made behind closed doors, when we don't have the light of day on it. And that's what the telecoms are trying to do. They're trying to come in at a moment when we have so many other issues we're worrying about, wars and a bad economy and all that, and move behind the scenes. Our great struggle is to push this into the open. And we have, amazingly enough, and I've been very critical of President Obama on a lot of issues, but just the other day, he said in a YouTube interview that he's passionately in favor of net neutrality, that it is absolutely essential, didn't back off a bit. And that's important because everybody's looking for the tiniest opening, the bad guys looking for the tiniest opening. The president sent a good signal there.
What about Comcast takeover of NBC?
Would be horrible. It's exactly the wrong direction to go. You know, I think this gets back to the journalism issue again because, you know, it's funny. People say, well, if you subsidize independent, nonprofit, non-commercial media, you're letting the government get its hands in the way. Well, if you do nothing, what we're evolving to very rapidly in this country is sort of a nexus of corporate power and government power, where corporations are driving it, much like the Gilded Age, but, you know, on steroids. That should frighten anyone who's genuinely concerned about government power. And when you allow, the government allows these companies like Comcast and NBC, both of which were built on government monopoly licenses. These are not free market companies. They're built on government monopoly licenses to merge so that the same company that dominates internet service provision also is producing the content that goes over those wires. So it has a stake in basically setting up a private
like
network.
Cablevision and Newsday here in New York.
And in communities across this country.
Everywhere, and wiping out any alternative voices. It is exactly the darkest Orwellian future. It's why the journalism fight now is so important, because it has to be the counterbalance to this combined corporate government power.
We have to leave it there. I want to thank you both for being with us. Robert McChesney and John Nichols, their new book, The Death and Life of American Journalism. That does it for the show. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke. Show for the producer, Armata Angela, Steve Martinez. I'm Amy Goodman, Juan Gonzalez. Thanks for joining us.